there. Okay, let's jump into section number 1, which is basically that second page of your worksheet there. Section 1, student information. Very important that this is the student and not the parent. Don't get confused here. And you wouldn't think this would be a big deal, but first and last name is a question that's missed a lot on the FAFSA form. The name needs to match exactly to what the Social Security card states. For instance, my son's name is Benjamin, but I call him Ben. And if he does the FAFSA form and I list Ben, the Social Security Administration is going to question that and say, who is Ben? This Social Security number belongs to Benjamin. So just pull your Social Security card and make sure that you know that information. That's a big one, and we don't want you to miss out on that. Also, check the number. Sometimes parents will put in their social number here. You don't want to do that, and nothing kills a FAFSA more quickly than a wrong Social Security number, so just make sure on that. Citizenship status is our next section. If you're a U.S. citizen, that's very easy. You're just going to mark that. And if you're an eligible non-citizen, you'll see that you do have to meet one of these criteria. You have to be a U.S. permanent resident or a conditional permanent resident. If you have any questions about citizenship, we'll be happy to talk to you afterwards about those specific examples. The next section asks about student marital status. And this is as of the date the FAFSA is completed. So the student not married today, married tomorrow, he has to decide, does he want to file the FAFSA today and is not married, or tomorrow was married. And very important, sometimes students will list married thinking this is for parent, but this is just for student. Selective service. If you have a male student, all males have to be registered for selective service, which is basically our draft. If the student is going to be 17 at the time the FAFSA is filed, then no worries here. This section is going to be completely skipped and left blank. But if the student, the male, is 18, he must be registered with selective service. And the way that works is that on the FAFSA form, if he hasn't done that yet, there's a box where he can say, just register me now. And they'll take care of registering the student right away. But if the student wants to do it himself, he can go to sss.gov, which is our selective service website, and register himself. If he's between the ages of 18 and 26, he has to be registered. There's a section here about drug convictions, and if a student has never attended college, and just by the way, if you're in high school and you're taking some college classes, that doesn't count as attending college. They mean attending college as a regular college student pursuing a degree, not a high school student. So if a student's never attended college or never received federal student aid before, then this will automatically skip and move on. Hopefully the student has never had a drug conviction. If any of you here have ever had a drug conviction, you can come up and talk with us and we'll tell you what that means for financial aid. The last box is a statistical question that's asked the highest grade level of the mother and father. This is the birth mother and the birth father. This is what they want to know. What grade level, how much college or high school or middle school did the father have and the mother have? And they ask this question because they want to know how many first-generation college students are out there. Some states give money, but Kentucky does not, unfortunately. But it's just a real important question so that they can keep those stats. Now, before we move to the next section, I want to talk about some important questions not on the worksheet. We talked about state a little bit. The state of legal residence is really important. They want to know the student's permanent home state. And most students that are going to have to file the FAFSA and list the parent date, that's the parent's home state. It's also used to give aid for state grants. And in the formula, when they're determining the EFC, it matters which state you live in because there are little things called state taxes. And some states have higher taxes than others. So that's really important. Typically, you're a resident of any state in the country if you've lived in that state for at least 5 years. If you've lived in that state for less than 5 years, you want to check with each individual state. Kentucky's rule is pretty much if you've lived here for 1 year and did not attend college, you can establish residency, you and your parents. But you want to make sure, if you're a Kentucky resident, you list Kentucky so you can be considered for those programs. Another question that's important that's not on the worksheet, they're going to ask about high school completion status. So when the student begins college in 10-11, what will the high school completion status be? They're going to ask high school diploma, meaning will the student have one by when they start school, or will it be a GED, or maybe they're homeschooled? So you want to make sure you answer that one. And then another one that's sometimes missed is degree or certificate. in 2010, 2011? What degree or certificate will you, the student, be working on? A lot of students make an error here and they say, I want to be a doctor. So they'll put, a doctoral program. Well, what they want to know is the first degree, the immediate degree the student's going to be working on. So if they're going to a community college to get a 2-year degree, they're going to make sure they mark associate degree with a general education program. Or maybe they're going to a technical school. They would want to mark that for a certificate or diploma. Or if they're going for a 4-year bachelor's, they want to make sure they mark that on that form. And we say if the student's unsure to mark first bachelor's, because that way they'll be considered for the maximum types of aid. Other questions, grade level. They're going to ask, what's the student's grade level in 10-11? And this is another one that says, I've never attended college before. And a lot of students that go to high school coursework, joint coursework, will say, I've attended before. But if you've never attended before, you want to mark never attended college, or maybe if you're an upperclassman, you mark one of those other categories. And expected enrollment. Do you think you're going to be full-time? Do you think you're going to be 3/4 time or half-time? We encourage everybody, if you're unsure, to just go ahead and mark full-time. But most students that go straight into college out of high school and they aren't working full-time will go to school full-time, but it can vary, so you want to check that and make sure it's right. All right, now this is a really important one too. They ask you, okay, well, what kind of aid would you like to receive? They don't ask you, would you like to receive grants? Why would they ask you that question? Grants are free money. Everybody would say yes to that question. But they ask you, would you like to receive work study? Or would you like to receive student loans? And then they ask about the TEACH program. We encourage students to go ahead and say yes to work study and student loans. Maybe not the TEACH grant because it has some very interesting things. But just by marking yes to that question, it doesn't mean you're going to get work study. It doesn't mean you have to take a student loan. It just means you're going to be considered for these programs. So I always encourage students to answer yes to those questions and make sure. Some people think that if they don't mark these boxes, it's going to mean more grant aid, but that's just plain not true. This just gives you an opportunity to get those different types of aid. All right, another question. You have the chance to list this information on your FAFSA. Up to 10 colleges can get all of this information sent to them. Now, if you have students that are going to start school in the fall, students, I hope you've narrowed it down to fewer than 10 colleges, but maybe you haven't. But what you do is you do the FAFSA and you list your 10 schools and you submit them. If you only have one school, you list one school. You put that information in, and when you go out on the web, they're going to ask for what they call a school code. And you may want to check with the school so you're aware, but it's really easy when you're on the web to do a lookup, search by state, and you can see the name of the school and put that in. We always say list your first and second choice schools at the top. Maybe list the ones with the earliest deadlines first. Some schools really pay attention to the order that you rank those schools when you're sending them. And if for some reason you send it to 10 and you suddenly have an 11, you can take one of those 10 off and add another one, or you can wipe them all out. I really did have a student one time that listed 30 different schools on their FAFSA. The only thing is if you put 10 in and then you change it to, let's say, 10 different, those original 10 drop off. So if you make any corrections or data, you have to make sure you go back and add that original one. But hopefully that won't be the case for you all. And then housing plan. And this is the last one that's not on the worksheet. But they're going to ask, where are you going to live in 10-11? Are you going to live on campus? Are you going to live with a parent? Or are you going to live off campus? And so if you live on campus, sometimes that's a little more expensive than if you live at home with a parent. So it's important to make sure that you list the housing. And selecting a housing option doesn't mean you're actually applying for campus housing. That just means that you're telling the financial aid office that's where you think you're going to live. You can always change that. And you want to make sure you submit a housing application as well if you need to. And if you're unsure what you're going to do, I might live on campus, I might live with parents, we tell you, well then just go ahead and mark on campus. Mark the most expensive one so that you can be considered for the most amount of types of aid.